Welcome back. In the last episode, we managed to make our first HV machines, but we run them on MV power with an internal battery as buffer. It is now time to move these to a proper HV line. Since HV steam turbines have quite some efficiency loss and the steam tank won't buffer enough, we shall have a battery buffer that will slowly charge up and then feed our new machinery. As for the turbines, we shall retrieve the ones from our blast furnaces. We also take the ones from the MV workshop line, since we are going to power everything of that tier from the new buffer. And now we can draw a cable to the roof, where we shall place all of our old MV turbines. We shall use a transformer to reduce the cable size. Finally, we cover everything even if there is no rain in this biome. Now that we have power in our new battery buffer, we can start laying down the new backbone cable of our base. And the first machine that shall be connected is our EBF, so that we keep slowly smelting high-tier materials. Then our MV workshop. Finally, we can connect our new HV workshop line. And we place a diode that will limit the current so to not have to make thicker cables. Now, we have various kinds of issues with our current or processing setup. Soon we will want to process many minerals in more complex ways for the byproducts. But our byproduct processing machines are all spread around. So we shall make a new room, where we will stick together all the electric mineral processing machines. And with these machines we can now gather some rare materials. And now that we have lots of materials, we can craft a batch of circuits that will help us build any machine we could need of the current tier. With this batch of circuits, we can complete our HV workshop. And while making these machines, we completed a lot of quests that gave us a lot of loot bags. These have some quite interesting rewards, but opening them is a chance of giving something from the default trash bag. To avoid that, we can enchant the loot bag. To do that, we need a motor of the loot bag tier and a lucky book. The best way to get the books is to use an Ender IO enchanter. However, making that has two issues, an enchantment table and vibrant alloy. Making that metal would require us to basically do as much stuff as going to the moon, but we can get enough from one of the quest rewards. As for the enchantment table, we would need to do some magic stuff, but, instead, we can go find one in some abandoned wizard tower. Now we can craft our enchanter and bring it close to the XP that our farm produced in the meanwhile. Next, we shall start producing the enchanted books we need for the better loot bags. We take 40 levels at a time due to the way levels work. This takes quite some time, but after a lot of work, we are ready to open our loot bags with boosted output. And in this clip you can see where the rewards come from. And here's the total output in a chest. Next, we spend the rest of our emeralds to open some MV bags too. And all of that loot reminded us of our next objective, the moon. To get there, we are going to need a rocket, which is built in a NASA workbench. There are two things preventing us from making it, mainframes and nether stars. To get the later, we will have to farm some withers, and, at least to get the skulls, we can use a mob farm. So, back to Ender IO we go. This time, we need a weird thing made with the head of a zombie. Then we have to kidnap a whole walking zombie. We need him in order to make a Frank zombie. Then we also take 2 Endermans for some crystals that will allow us to complete a powered spawner. However, before this can work, we also need to retrieve a real spawner. And if we don't want to stay here a whole day, we shall use our new chromium HV drill. We combine the 2 kinds of spawners to have a working electric one. Finally, we set it up in the nether to farm skeletrons. While our farm is working, we can move on to the other missing item, the mainframe. And now we face one small issue. We need some central processing units, and these can only be manufactured inside a clean room. A clean room is a special room that will make sure no dust goes inside our circuits. And thus we start digging the foundations for our new room. The room is going to have its walls made out of special blocks that will limit the dust, while the ceiling will have the air filters. There is a door, but we are going to use an elevator to get inside. That's not just for comfort but also because this room must be kept clean from any dust specks. By watching the controller, we can see the percentage of cleanliness, which is equal to the efficiency, also known as the chance of recipes made inside the rooms that will succeed. And if we open the door, we will have a chance of voiding items for a few seconds. So, let's never open it. And now time for our first clean room recipe. Once we got some dope wafers, we can start engraving some CPUs on them, which we move to the cutting machine. And those cut wafers will be the main protagonist of the next series of circuits, the processors. And now we can start working on that series from the integrated processor. We combine two integrated into an assembly, two assembly into a workstation. And finally, with two workstations we can get a mainframe, which works 2 tiers above us. The other thing we needed for our objective is some nether stars. So we go check our skeleton farm in the nether, where we find enough wither skulls and also some nice extra goodies. Fighting these bad boys is going to be annoying, so we shall make a cage that can resist their blasts. And, for extra safety, we shall also get a nanosuit. For attacking, we get a vanadium steel sword, and our trusty carbon crossbow, which we shall use with our new vanadium steel-tipped carbon bolts. And with that, we are ready to go. We make a cage to contain the bosses and then summon the first one. However, it looks like we made it too small and it managed to get out. So we hit him with our vanadium-tipped carbon bolts empowered carbon crossbow to make him notice us. Then we swap to our vanadium steel sword and finish him. For the next boss, we shall make the cage slightly larger so that he can fit. Now farming nether stars has become a breeze. Once we collected 9, we can compress and then cut them to get the plates we needed for our NASA workbench. And thus we are now ready to start working on our rocket. The first step is to use our new implosion compressor to compress triple steel plates with the power of explosives. And even if it doesn't look like it, that machine is one of the most pollutants. One more issue is that after compressing a lot of plates, we run out of TNT. A workaround is to use a bunch of the dusts we have laying around to make some powder barrels. However, those run out quickly because they are not as powerful as TNT. And there is something that is even better than TNT, the industrial version of it. To make it, we can mix the nitric acid we got from a loot bag with some sulfuric acid. Then we retrieve some toluene from our TNT line which run out of sulfuric acid. And we make it react with the better acid, the nitration mixture, to make industrial explosives. And with that we can now finish compressing our heavy-duty plates. Now we can move on to making a nose cone, some rocket fins, fuel canisters, the rocket and the lander engines, the lander module, and finally, after making a 104 buttons keyboard, we can assemble the rocket control computer. And now we have all the parts to build our first tier 1 rocket. Reaching that objective took us 80 hours of hard work, but we are not done yet. We are going to need a launch pad with a fuel loader, and that reminded us that we are also going to need some rocket fuel. For that tier, we can use cetane-boosted diesel. Finally, when we reach space, we are going to need some oxygen tanks in order to breathe. After filling them, we can equip those with also an oxygen mask and the proper oxygen gear. And before taking off to our new adventure, we shall leave something to cook inside our improved EBF, such as nichrome, which is the next coil upgrade. This requires quite a lot of power, so we shall have a pair of covers that will stop the EBF before our batteries get over-discharged. But, of course, we want to cook as much as we can, so we are also going to add a bunch more of solar panels to our roof. Now that we checked everything, we can build a launch pad and start fueling our rocket. Once it is fueled up, we can finally take off to the moon. And, in case you are wondering, all that smoke from the rocket is causing a huge amount of pollution. And since we did not calculate on which day to launch, we got there during one of the long nights. But the nanosuit comes equipped with night vision, so it's not an issue. Since we have limited oxygen supply, we shall not waste time and seek for our first objective, titanium. Titanium comes from bauxite and we also get tons of aluminium with it. We are going to need both of these materials in big amounts for the next tier of our progression. We can also gather some Certus quartz that we will be using for automation. And while mining those minerals, we also got a lot of moon rocks. Those can be worked to extract some tungstate, which we can be worked into tungsten steel, that is required to upgrade our nanosuit with a jetpack. And we really want that since we can't use our gilder on the moon anymore. So, time to go back home and process our loot. And once we get back, we find out how much pollution the rocket left behind it. Anyways, we now have a small setup to slowly extract tungstate out of moon rocks, where we can drop all of those. And then we have to work the bauxite, which is like any other mineral. While it can give gallium, today what we really want is titanium oxide. So we shall wash, crush, centrifuge it. And finally we got some rutile dust, which we can drop inside our messy ABF chest, where our newly built automation will process it into titanium tetrachloride and then cook it. However, the so obtained titanium is still hot and this time we have to cool it inside a vacuum freezer. And with that titanium we can do the first upgrade to our jetpack. Also, we just got into the next tier. In the meantime, we also managed to get enough tungstate to start processing it. Doing so will require our first EV machine, which we are going to power through a step-up HV transformer. And now we can manually do the first process of the tungsten line. The second step can be done in our old HV chemical reactor. Then, to extract the tungsten oxide from that dust, we move to our newly built large chemical reactor, which, thanks to its 2 amps HV energy hatches, can run EV recipes. Also, this multiblock is one of the few with perfect overclock, which means that it turns raw power into raw speed. Making a circuit board in LV takes 40 seconds. While the EV LCR takes half a second. It takes less time to walk all the way to the back of our base and make half a stack circuit plates than to make a single one on our first chemical reactor. Going back to the tungstic acid, we cook it twice inside our EBF to extract the pure tungsten dust. Then, using our new EV mixer, we can make tungsten steel dust. However, we have now found a bigger issue. Even our upgraded nichrome coils can't smelt tungsten steel. So we shall make the advanced jetpack be enough. And now that we have an equipment that allows for better movement, we can take off to the moon again. This time, we shall fly around until we find a suspicious crater that leads to a labyrinth full of monsters. After adventuring in there for a while, we finally found a bigger room, where the boss resides. He is strong enough to grab us, but he can't take our vanadium steel-tipped carbon slime leaf quartz-enriched bolts and ends up dropping a key. That key can open the locked loot chest that was in the room next to the boss one. After retrieving the ancient lost schematic on how to build better rocket, we lift ourselves back to the bauxite mine. While we are working all of that stuff, we can go check our rewards for achieving such big tasks. Our reward shall be a personal dimension, where it will always be sunny, with nice looking green grass and some underground space for the power and logistic networks. Once we decided how we want it to look like, we can go in our new dimension, where we shall establish our Stargate factory. But that's something we will do in the episode after the next one. Bye bye.